Do we really need to explain ourselves much here? PERF assisted in organizing and coordinating the recent raids on Occupy encampments nationwide in the United States. We couldn't sit idle while we watched our brothers and sisters being beaten, gassed, and sent to hospitals for exercising fundamental rights and essential liberties that were bestowed on them by their Constitution. PERF organized has had its hands in an assortment of lawmaking decisions over the past few years. From how to deal with immigration, homicide law, and even how to police on a nationwide scale, this research forum is the epitome of a paid, special interest police body. That being said, sit back, grab some popcorn and enjoy the ride. And remember, don't dox and drive. We are the cabin, we are the 99%. We do not forgive, we do not forget. Expect us.
It's a small world. It's a small world. It's a small world. We're living in one small world. It's a small world. It's all one. It's a small world. It's all one small world. It's a small world.
We are the 1% who are burdened with running this country.
We are the 1% who are better than the other 99%.
We are the 1%, the true minority.
Millionaires from all across the country are flying their private jets to McCarran Park to occupy Williamsburg.
Why occupy Williamsburg when we can just buy it? Because we can't let those kids have a monopoly on protests. Only we can have monopolies.
Like Occupy Wall Street, we have just one goal.
We want to end unemployment. China, we won't rest until all of that cheap, exploitable labor is utilized.
Progress corporate personhood. Yes, corporations are people. And so they should be able to marry and reproduce and run for office. Starbucks Halliburton 2012. Yes.
We have to veil our political interests with campaign donations. We hate this don't ask, don't tell of corruption. Time to let us come out and bribe politicians openly.
Free Bernie Madoff!
We're tired of hippies controlling our political system. Our democracy should be pure, like it was in ancient Athens, only for rich white men.
So come together to take back Williamsburg. Celebrity appearances will include Rush Limbaugh, the reanimated corpse of Ayn Rand, and the entire New York Yankees, a team that understands the best way to gain power is to buy it.
Join us and protest. Or be a job creator and hire an intern to do it for you. Don't worry, you don't have to pay them.
Well, police departments across the country are coming under criticism for using excessive force against Occupy Wall Street protesters over the past 2 months. In Seattle, Mayor Mike McGinn apologized Wednesday, hours after an 84-year-old retired Seattle school teacher named Dorley Rainey was pepper sprayed in the face during a protest. Photographs of the woman moments after she was pepper sprayed went viral. One photograph shows the chemical irritant and liquid used to treat it dripping from her chin. According to Occupy Seattle organizers, a priest and a pregnant teenager were also pepper sprayed that Tuesday night. Seattle police spokesman Jeff Capel defended the use of pepper spray, saying it is, quote, not age specific, no more dangerous to someone who is 10 or someone who is 80.
To talk more about what happened, Dorley Rainey is joining us right now from Seattle. She is 84 years old, a longtime Seattle resident and community activist. Dorley was born in Austria, moved to the United States in 1956 after working as a technical translator in the U.S. Army in Europe. She briefly campaigned to run for mayor in Seattle in 2009. Dorley Rainey, welcome to Democracy Now! Tell us what happened to you, why you were out in the streets, and how you ended up being pepper sprayed in the face.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on. I am a member of Occupy Seattle. I spent 5 days in D.C. with the October 2011 group, which was a wonderful thing to go to. And I hope to go to that group again in March. I got pepper sprayed because we were penned in by the bicycle groups until there was no way out. And the minute the people had us penned so tightly that we could barely move, they started letting loose with the pepper spray. And it was not just a few people that were targeted. When you look at the pictures, you will see that the pepper spray fog and the stream of pepper spray is all over. My problem is not only with police brutality, it is with the progressive, getting worse attitude of the police. I was tear gassed, and thank you, Norm Stamper, in Seattle when the WTO was there in Seattle. And I also was in a workshop with Arundhati Roy when she was in Seattle for the WTO. These occasions, while they were pretty violent outside, were not nearly as bad as what we see now. It is getting progressively worse. Our freedoms are getting curtailed, and I just listened to the press being banned at Wall Street. This in a country where we export our sort of democracy all over the world at gunpoint. And what we have to do is change the mindset of people that guns will not solve our crisis. The president going to Australia to introduce troops into Australia, I fear for Australians because sooner or later they'll be occupied like our troops are occupying practically half of the world. Once the troops get there, there's no getting them out.
I wanted to get your comment, Dorley, on the Seattle Mayor Mike McGinn apologizing Wednesday to protesters who were pepper sprayed Tuesday night. He wrote in a statement, "Last night the police used pepper spray in 2 separate incidents. Many are now questioning whether police use of force was appropriate to the circumstances. I have seen video, written descriptions of the incidents, and to those engaged in peaceful protests, I'm sorry that you were pepper sprayed." Mayor McGinn also wrote that he spoke to you, Dorley Rainey, and asked how you're doing. Can you describe that conversation and what you told Mayor McGinn?
We spoke very briefly, and I told him that he is not in charge of what is going on, that our politicians really have lost control, and this sort of brutality is now endemic all over the United States and is being controlled by Homeland Security, by the FBI, and by the military, and the war on terrorism. And it has nothing to do any longer with what individual mayors may want or not want to do.
Well, a number of questions have been raised about how much cities across the country have coordinated their actions against Occupy Wall Street. Oakland Mayor Jean Quan recently admitted in an interview with the BBC that she and leaders participated in a conference call.
I was recently on a conference call of 18 cities across the country who had the same situation where what had started as a political movement and a political encampment ended up being an encampment that was no longer in control of the people who started them. And what I think you're starting to see is that the Occupy movement is looking for more stability. I spent a lot of last week talking to peaceful demonstrators, ones who wanted to separate themselves in my city away from the anarchist groups who had been looking for a confrontation with the police.
As I walk through this wicked world, searching for light in the darkness of insanity, I ask myself, is all hope lost? Is there only pain and hatred and misery?
story of the week, an Up with Chris Hayes exclusive. Speaker Boehner's lobbying buddies are proposing a hit job on Occupy Wall Street. This week, here at Up, we obtained a memo written for the American Bankers Association that lays out a plan for a nearly $1 million campaign against Occupy Wall Street and any politicians who might express sympathy for Occupy Wall Street, including specific Democratic politicians in contested races. The memo was prepared by the Washington lobbying firm Clark, Lytle, Geduldig and Cranford, or CLGC for short. Two of the partners at the firm are former aides to Speaker John Boehner, and the firm's website boasts of its closeness to the current speaker. Prepared as a pitch document for the American Bankers Association, a client of CLGC, the memo lays out the political threat Occupy Wall Street poses for the banks and their sworn defenders in the Republican Party. Democratic victories in 2012, the authors write, would mean more than just short-term political discomfort for Wall Street firms. It has the potential to have very long-lasting political, policy, and financial impacts on the companies in the center of the bullseye. So here we have, in black and white, former Boehner aides who now lobby for Wall Street, admitting Democrats will be tougher on Wall Street, and they also admit that Occupy Wall Street and emboldened Democrats might push Republicans to distance themselves from Wall Street's bigger firms. The bigger concern, in the words of the memo's authors, quote, should be that Republicans will no longer defend Wall Street companies. In order to head off this terrifying eventuality, the memo proposes a program of opposition research on Occupy Wall Street activists, which, quote, will also identify opportunities to construct fact-based negative narratives of the OWS for high-impact media placement to expose the backers. They admit that individual companies under threat by OWS and its adoption by Democrats likely will not be the best spokespeople for their own cause because, well, everyone hates the bankers. So the former Boehner aides who now lobby for Wall Street sketch out a strategy of deploying proxies to shill for Wall Street and against Occupy without the public knowing. The former Boehner aides also urge big banks to punish politicians who target them early on in order to send a message. Quote, a big challenge is to demonstrate that these companies still have political strength and that making them a political target will carry a severe political cost. And they say that a strong media placement early in a transition to adopt the OWS movement will send a powerful signal about the risks of carrying that through. One goal of this campaign, the former Boehner aides turned Wall Street lobbyists write, is to, quote, provide cover for political figures who defend the industry.
The conference calls were organized by the Police Executive Research Forum, a national police group, for discussion on policing and the Occupy Wall Street movement around the country. We're joined by two people. Chuck Wexler is the director of the Police Executive Research Forum, and Norm Stamper is with us, the former police chief of Seattle, who recently wrote an article for The Nation magazine titled Paramilitary Policing from Seattle to Occupy Wall Street. I want to start with Norm Stamper because you just may have heard Dorley say thank you, Norm Stamper, as she got pepper sprayed today, remembering what it was like in 1999 as well at the Battle of Seattle, at the time when you were presiding over the police actions. Your thoughts today?
Well, we made huge mistakes back in 1999, and I'm afraid they're being repeated today across the country, in Seattle, in Oakland, and in all other cities where there have been confrontations between the police and members of the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Well, Norm Stamper, in your article, you mentioned that you think that there are institutional problems, structural problems in policing, that no matter who the political leaders are or what the top brass are, that these problems can continue to crop up and appear to be getting worse.
I certainly do believe that. I think the drug war, which has put police officers against young people and poor people and people of color, the war on terrorism, the domestic dimensions of that war, have all served to increase the militarization of America's police forces. And this is particularly tragic because prior to these developments, we were on a path to create what I would call authentic partnerships with the community. That means no more unilateral decision making. It means, for example, today, police officers and Occupy movement leaders, understanding the diffusion of that leadership, getting together and carving out rules of engagement, if you will, that will help protect public safety, public health, and also assure civil liberties, human rights, and some degree of social justice.
As I said, we're also joined on the phone by Chuck Wexler, Executive Director of the Police Executive Research Forum that coordinated the conference call with mayors and police officials around the country. Can you talk about what's happening today? The Occupy Oakland, the massive police response, the kind of police response we saw in Seattle with the pepper spraying of not only Dorley Rainey, but many other people directly in the face. The conversation that took place and why you coordinated this call, Chuck.
Well, yeah, good morning. First of all, correction, we did not coordinate the call with the mayors. It was simply with police chiefs, and it originated from Boston and Portland. Police chiefs in those cities asked to just compare notes. I think, this movement has evolved since it started. It was very, relatively peaceful. And quite frankly, I think a lot of the police officers had a lot in common with, the demonstrators in terms of the concerns about the economy and working class people and so forth. But I think, over time, in some cities, the nature of the demonstration has changed. But it's hard to talk about it, all over the United States, because I think you probably have, it's very idiosyncratic depending upon the city, depending upon the nature of who's involved. But in some cities, it has that the hand of the police has been forced by, either violence or the changing nature of what's been happening on the ground. I don't have the details about Oakland and Seattle and so forth. I can just tell you, and I know Norm Stamper would agree, at least insofar as we learned a lot from what happened in Seattle when he was chief up there about handling demonstrators. And I think the police are far more careful about not wanting to be drawn into something that it really has nothing to do with them, and really trying as much as they can to exercise restraint, to use intermediaries to reach out to the leaders of these Occupy movements. The challenge is there aren't really any leaders, or if there are leaders, they don't want to be leaders. So it's difficult to know who's responsible, who's in charge. But I think, the police today are far more careful about exercising restraint. I mean, by and large, you have 17,000 police agencies in the country, so, it's hard to make generalizations. But I do think that, when the first Occupy Wall Street movement started and police saw what happened on the bridge and so forth, and the police sort of getting drawn into that, there's been really a reluctance on the part of the police, to want to move unless absolutely necessary. And so I think the political structure within these cities has played a big role in determining what kind of action the police are going to take.
Norm Stamper, your response.
Well, I have great respect for Chuck, and I do believe that since 1999 and the battle in Seattle, there have been many changes. My concern is many of those changes have been for the worse. The officers, for example, in Oakland were dressed as my police officers were in Seattle, which is in effect in full battle gear. We were using military tactics. I authorized the use of chemical agents on nonviolent offenders. I thought I had good justification at that time. I did not. The police officer in me was thinking about emergency vehicles, fire trucks, aid cars being able to get through a key intersection. The police chief in me should have said, this is wrong, and vetoed that decision. I will regret that decision for the rest of my life. We took a military response to a situation that was fundamentally nonviolent, in which Americans were expressing their views and their values, and used tear gas on them, and that was just plain wrong.
Chuck Wexler, I'd like to ask you about that. Not only about this issue of the increased militarization, also that there have been other cities where law enforcement has taken a very different approach. In Philadelphia, in Albany, the district attorney is refusing to, declining to prosecute cases of arrests of people who are being arrested for being in a park. But also the way that some of the police forces are dealing with the press, and because the press are supposed to be there to be able to be the eyes and ears of the public in these events, but increasingly you're getting reporters arrested, removed, not allowed to be at the biggest flash points, or to be able to take photos or to take camera shots of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's the police response is going to vary from city to city, but let me just kind of back up a little bit and respond to what Norm said. And I have a lot of respect for Norm Stamper too. We learned a lot. He's very forthcoming with what went right and what went wrong with the battle for Seattle, if you will. But in fairness, you were faced, Norm, in a very difficult situation, and in fact, there really hadn't been many demonstrations up till Seattle. I mean, prior to the Vietnam era, there was a big lag time, but what does happen in some of these events is you can have 90% of the people are there peacefully, and you have this small contingent. And I think, Norm, what you had in Seattle is you had this group of anarchists that somehow was able to cause such disturbances that it forced a reaction that perhaps was an overreaction, but I don't think the police were prepared for it. And today, the police struggle between these two extremes, between people who go to exercise their First Amendment rights and then people who are there to cause, damage and destruction.
So, Norm Stamper, respond to that issue. Why you still think you were wrong, that you're taking issue with Chuck Wexler here, that given the situation in 1999, you now say you did the absolutely wrong thing?
Well, for 5 years after I retired, I remember being on book tour and having people come up to me and say, I was on the streets, and I got to tell you, I was shocked at the behavior of the police. And I asked them about what was particularly shocking about the behavior, and it all came back to me. It came back to my authorization of the use of chemical agents, a euphemism for tear gas or pepper spray, and the effect that had from that moment on and throughout the week. There's no question but what anarchists, by definition, or for that matter, even recreational rioters who are simply sitting in a bar and see the action and get attracted to the downtown area, we had some of that, can help distract attention away from the cause itself and create major public safety issues for the police. Here's my point. If the police and the community in a democratic society are really working hard, and it is hard work, to forge authentic partnerships rather than this unilateral paramilitary response to these demonstrations, that the relationship itself serves as a shock absorber. Picture police officers helping to protect the demonstrators. Picture demonstrators saying, we see people on the fringes, for example, who are essentially undemocratic in their tactics. And so we need to work together to resolve that issue. These resolutions are clearly not easy. But one of the things that complicates the picture enormously is when a woman like Ms. Rainey is pepper sprayed. When innocent people who are there to protest what I consider to be very legitimate grievances against corporate America, against a government that has, in many respects, been bought off by corporations, the police have a responsibility to be neutral. It should be apparent that I'm not neutral, but I'm no longer a cop. And police officers on the streets really do need to be neutral referees, and they need the help of their civilian, if I may use that term, partner.
Faces and traces of home. All you think
of neutral referees, I wanted to bring a judge into this discussion. Retired New York Supreme Court Judge Karen Smith, who worked as a legal observer early Tuesday morning here in New York. I saw her right on the corner of Wall Street shortly after police raided the Occupy Wall Street encampment. Judge Smith, what did you see?
Well, I arrived about 1:30, 1:40 in the morning, got out and walked to Day and Broadway, and the police were in full riot gear. I mean, it was a paramilitary operation if there ever was one. I mean, which sets up, here it is, 1:30 in the morning, what we call a stealth eviction, 1:30 in the morning, and they were just lined up 2 blocks from on either side from the park so that nobody could get near. With this solid wall of police, I was wearing, and then I brought this, a hat which says the National Lawyers Guild Legal Observer, and as you can see in color, it's quite bright, and
it's
at night...
It's fluorescent green.
It's fluorescent green, and then I was wearing it, and I had a pad and a pen, and I was there to take down the names of people who were arrested so we could follow them through the system and just observe what was going on. And as I'm standing there, some African-American woman goes up to a police officer and says, I need to get in, my daughter's there, I want to know if she's okay. And he said, move on, lady. And he kept pushing, they kept pushing with their sticks, pushing back. And she said, and she was crying. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he throws her to the ground and starts hitting her in the head. And I walk over and I say, look, cuff her if she's done something, but you don't need to do that. And he said, lady, do you want to get arrested? And I said, do you see my hat? I'm here as a legal observer. He said, you want to get arrested? And he pushed me up against the wall. And, you know, it was late at night. There was a lot going on. People were, all of a sudden, there was like a cordon of police pushing everybody into Day Street between Broadway and Church. And it seemed like they were setting everybody up to get arrested. And then they started, some people broke away, some of the police, and started running after people. I moved away and then decided that I needed to get on the other side. I received a call that there was things that were developing on Pine and Broadway. And so I moved all the way east to go around the police and then ended up on Pine and Broadway, which is really where I ran into you.
And of course, you had a personal interest as well. Your son was also one of the participants in Occupy Wall Street.
My son was he's a staff person for SEIU 1199, and they were there in support. They were not going to get arrested, but they wanted to show the demonstrators and the occupiers that, and they've been supportive all along as one of the unions. And he was there, and I was watching carefully to make sure that he did not get hurt as well. I was very concerned. At Pine and Broadway, it was sort of a standoff. People weren't, there was a lot of confusion. People didn't know what was going on. There were some people that may have sat on some police cars just in comfort, but nobody was, I heard later on reports talk about objectivity of the press, you know, that they were jumping up and down and they were taunting the police. The only time I ever saw it when I first got there on Day and Broadway, they were just saying, shame on you, you know, to the police, but that was it. And down on Pine and Broadway, at least until about 4:30 in the morning, I didn't see any provocation whatsoever.
We're going to lose the satellite for Dorley Rainey in Seattle. But I wanted to ask you, Dorley, what did it feel like to be pepper sprayed in the face? This dramatic photograph of you being helped by 2 people right afterwards.
Well, first of all, it's very painful. And when they say there are no after effects, I still have a pain in my lungs, and my voice is kind of raspy. I don't know how long that will last. But the thing really is not about me getting pepper sprayed. It is a much bigger issue than that, and I would like everybody to keep that in mind, that while we're getting pepper sprayed, other issues are not being heard. And that's my problem. I feel issues become a major focus to the detriment of the real issues that cause this whole problem.
And I'd like to ask Chuck Wexler, this whole issue of the police chiefs trying to exchange information. Was there any involvement of the Department of Homeland Security or the federal officials in the discussions with the various police chiefs?
Not on our conference call at all. But if I can just say a few things just in response to the last conversations. This is really the struggle that the police have. This is why, at the end of the day, I think what Norm was saying about, the partnerships and intermediaries and communication is so important because, this is a no-win situation for the police. And one of the things we've learned out of the 60s and out of the, Chicago Democratic Convention and all the ways from the South and all of the ways the police have had to handle these kind of situations is a minimum amount, a use of restraint, and I think that's the real challenge here. The police don't want to be in this situation, and whatever you can do to have intermediaries like the judge, whatever, be the people that are intervening rather than the police. I think it's a no-win situation for most police departments. They have worked really hard to develop partnerships with the community policing, all of those things, and sometimes you have one officer that does something, forgive me, stupid, and it characterizes the entire police force. But I think, if you look at the restraint that police use today versus what they used 10, 20, 30 years ago, it's substantially less use of force, but there's still mistakes and there's still, officers that are going to act inappropriately.
Chuck Wexler, in New York, we saw massive phalanx of police moving in the area where the judge was just describing. The police forced everyone out of the street onto the sidewalk and said, just get on the sidewalk. They were screaming to everyone, get on the sidewalk. As soon as people got on the sidewalk, they rushed them on the sidewalk up against the rails along the sidewalk. But I did want to ask you, how involved is FBI and Homeland Security in these discussions, Chuck Wexler?
We haven't they haven't been involved. Maybe they were involved at the local level, but nationally, at least on our conference calls, I don't think they didn't have a role.
There were some press reports that there were Homeland Security presentations urging that these arrests be conducted late at night.
and down, and in the end, it's only round and round, round, round and round. And out, it can't be helped, but there's a lot of it about. Without, and who'll deny it's what the fighting's all about?
Federal government, our voices are heard at the local level. We can make differences. A whole continent-wide cannot control a federal government with a banking system that prints money like it's paper. You can't even call it money anymore. Gold is money. Silver is money. Green dollars are not money. They're using inflation as a hidden tax to fuck the people. Prices go up. Do your wages go up? No. My wages didn't go up, but prices went up. Gas goes up. Milk goes up. Trains go up. How am I supposed to live? And this is all because our government prints too much money, starts too much wars, so they can sell their tanks, their guns, their missiles. Because that's all America exports. Is guns, missiles, and tanks. That's it. We need to bring production back to America. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. When you invest $100 in a bank, they multiply that by 9 and they send it out 9 different ways. They don't just make money on the initial investment, they make it 9 times the initial investment. That's fake money that they printed out of thin air. Fiat money. It's a fiat currency. 1913, this country died. When we adopted the central bank and we got rid of sound money. We used to be able in 1913 to walk into a bank and redeem our dollars with gold. Can we do that anymore? No! What's the price of gold now? Almost $2,000. It's gone up $600 an ounce this year. It's gonna keep rising. And it's gonna keep rising as long as we have bailouts, as long as we have quantitative easing, as long as our government keeps spending our money. Every dollar the government takes in federal taxation is another dollar that they spend. Every time they spend money, that's your money that they send overseas. They bail out Morgan Stanley and then Goldman Sachs. When I fuck up, who bails me out? No one. Why should Goldman Sachs get bailed out? $700 billion in 08. And they want more now? They want more. That wasn't enough? You're gonna drain. There's not gonna be a middle class in 10 years. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. And the Fed. Elect Ron Paul and the war. Ron Paul 2012. Sound money. Stop with the banksters printing money. Printing it, debasing our currencies. Driving up our prices. We don't need any more money in our economy. We got plenty in debt. No. And the Fed. And the fractional reserve system. And the wars. Get corporations out of our politics. Yes. Out of our politics.
And corporate personhood.
Wall Street is rigged. When Wall Street owns a majority of the wealth and they invest in Wall Street, they know when the market's gonna go up, they know when the market's gonna go down, and they all make money while we all lose money. How is that fair? And then after thousands, trillions of derivatives, they want bailouts. They have the balls to ask us for bailouts. No more bailouts. No more printing of money. No more quantitative easing. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. Sound money. Go back to a gold standard. The Depression will be nothing compared to 1913 when it hits us. 1930, when the Depression came, will be nothing like it will be in the coming years. If we lose America, we have nowhere else to run for freedom. There is no country left that promotes free markets, corporations not in politics. There's no country that has their own sound currency. There is nowhere left to run. If we lose America, we lose the world to the elite. The 1% will continue to get rich as we all live like slaves.
This photo is of a 19-year-old pregnant woman. This woman also pepper sprayed in the face and taken to the hospital. Police there, they say that they were only using pepper spray on people who are being assaultive towards officers or who were ignoring orders. We have some more pictures as well. You just see the mass presence of police there in Seattle that it took to break up this encampment. And finally, here's another photo of that woman, the pregnant woman, as she's been taken to the hospital. So it seemed a little strange, you know, all of these evictions of Occupy movements around the country happened during the same week, many even on the same day. Most of them very early in the morning, and included a very large police presence, and this time, no access even to the media. Radio host Alex Jones. I spoke to him earlier today from Austin, Texas, and I asked him if this is evidence that Big Brother is alive and well here in the U.S. Here's his take.
Well, it is. TSA under Homeland Security has now set up checkpoints on highways across the United States and are searching people like it's an airport, driving down the highway, something right out of a third world dictatorship, while our borders are pretty much wide open in many areas. And federally, they're putting in cameras, microphones everywhere. They have threat fusion centers that are run by the feds, sometimes at military bases that the local police departments and fire departments are all moving into. So this is a total federalization that violates our 10th Amendment. Why even have states? Why even have counties and cities if the federal government is running everything? And I noticed a few weeks ago you would see concerted on the same day in 10, 15, 20 cities, raids on Occupy Wall Street. I mean, that's obvious it's being concerted when it happens on the same day, same night, same morning, in the same way, same tactics. And now it's just admitted. And they're brutalizing people now. They're cracking them over the head with billy clubs. They're pepper spraying babies. And it's a message of, we don't like what you're doing. I mean, what happened early on was the Democratic Party tried to co-opt this, like the Republicans tried to co-opt the Tea Party, and that didn't really succeed. And so they've gone from a month ago, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Federal Reserve, the Obama administration, Ben Bernanke, all endorsing Occupy Wall Street when they thought that they could co-opt it, to now saying, get them out of here. And also I've discovered in Austin and in Detroit as well as New York, we've confirmed that when they let homeless people out who've been arrested for being drunk in public or sleeping on the sidewalk, or they release people from prison or homeless shelters or mental institutions, they tell them, go to Austin Occupy, go to New York Occupy. We won't arrest you there. So for the last month, they've been sending all the homeless people and mentally ill people and prisoners there so they can then demonize it and say, look, people are going to the bathroom on the ground, even when there's a porta potty. Fights are breaking out. There's robberies.
We've heard as well, Alex, we've heard as well that at some of these movements, police that used to have a pretty large presence in some of these areas, in some of these parts of the city, decided to just abandon those parts. So when violence happens, they're not there. I will say, I've spent a lot of time here at Occupy K Street here in Washington. Some of the protesters even tell me they've been warned by other protesters that people are being sent in by either Homeland Security or other agencies trying to get information. They're concerned. But what would these, so-called spies have to gain by infiltrating this movement?
Well, they're now trying to blame the shooting at the White House on Occupy Wall Street. What do they have to gain? They get intelligence so they can then demonize the group. They can set the groups up. Look, the system knows with its actuaries and different calculations that there is an uprising against the corruption on Wall Street and against the Federal Reserve coming.
But this is not an uprising that's quiet. I mean, they have all of their actions, all of their intentions posted on their websites. I mean, they don't need, this isn't a secret movement. This isn't
it's a peaceful thing.
CIA operation. This is a movement that is very open and transparent. So why would Homeland Security need to be sending people into these parks and into these squares to find out information?
Well, exactly. That's why the system knows that there's more political action, more demonstrating coming from across the political spectrum. So at first they kind of give Occupy Wall Street good press, try to make it a Democratic type thing so they can at least make it partisan. Now they're in the business of demonizing it, infiltrating it to try to manufacture or dig up dirt on them as a way to generally demonize all forms of protest in this country ahead of the full depressionary collapse, bank runs, and everything else that's in the works. I see the police and hear talk radio demonizing Occupy Wall Street across the board, calling them a bunch of dirty criminals. The New York Post called them rabble, which means basically criminal scum. This idea that protesting and demonstrating is criminal or is scummy or filthy is really un-American and anti-democratic across the world. And so that's my big concern. And now we have this MF Global taking $900 million of people's own bank accounts out of their system and giving it to mega banks and raiding people's private accounts like Gerald Celente that broke here yesterday and is now one of the biggest stories in the country. Why don't we see a perp walk for those criminals who are openly doing this? Well, it turns out that the head of the CFTC, according to Reuters, is invested deeply with Corzine, who runs this MF Global. So you've got these massive lootings and bank accounts being grabbed and derivatives and all these scams going on. None of them get in trouble. They get multi-trillion-dollar citizen-paid bailouts. And then when citizens are mad about the country going into a depression, the media demonizes the people and sics military-style police on them. I mean, what I saw in New York, where they were cracking women in the head for no reason with billy clubs and shooting veterans in the face with rubber bullets and almost killing them in Oakland.
I need a sign to let me know you're here. All of these lines are being crossed over the atmosphere. I need to know that things are gonna look up. 'Cause I feel us drowning in a sea spilled from a cup. And there is no place safe and no safe place to put my head. When you can feel the world shake from the words that I said. And call it all angels. And calling all you angels. And I won't give up if you don't give up. I won't give up if you don't give up. I won't give up if you don't give up. I won't give up if you don't give up. I need a sign to let me know you're here. 'Cause my TV set just keeps it all from being clear. I want a reason for the way things have to be. I need a hand to help build up some kind of hope inside of me. And call it all angels. And calling all you angels. When children have to play inside so they don't disappear, while private eyes saw marriage lies 'cause we don't talk for years. And football teams are kissing queens and losing sight of having dreams. In a world that what we want is only what we want until it's ours. And call it all angels. And calling all you angels. Calling all
You're listening to Small World Radio.